Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Mastroianni. Pretty excited that today we are recording the 20th episode of the Healthy Investor Podcast. So grateful that it's gone this far and really having a lot of fun along the way. Today I have with me Matt Dunn. Matt's a friend of mine, fellow real estate investor, and also an ultra marathon runner. So I can't wait to get into some of the details about those things with Matt. Matt is the sole founder of Right Move Properties, an apartment investing syndication whose company has owned 142 multifamily units within South and Central Florida, Eastern Tennessee, and Southern Alabama. Over the past 45 years, his company, Right Move Properties, has acquired $17.8 million in assets. This has been accomplished by utilizing value-add strategies, capitalizing on his analytical skills and attention to detail. He's able to close investment opportunities by being competitive and operating with integrity while achieving strong returns for his investor. Matt Dunn, thanks so much for being here. How are you today?
Doing wonderful. Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. So if we can just start tell us a little bit about your story. You and I know each other. We've been able to meet in person several times and have some phone calls. So I know a little bit more about you, but I'd like to have you share a little bit about your story, originally from the UK, and tell us about how you came over here and
Absolutely.
where you are today. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I've been in the business for 5 years now in real estate. So prior to that, as you mentioned, I was in the UK. I worked for an ultra luxury exotic car company. Got the opportunity to move to Florida in 2009. And at that time, I was not interested in real estate or didn't really know anything about real estate. In fact, it wasn't until I actually got a sizable tax rebate from a house I sold in the UK in 2015. I kept that house as a rental. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. It didn't really cash flow, but suddenly I was in this position of having some extra capital from the sale of the house and also the tax refund. And I honestly didn't have a clue what to do with it. I was always somebody that just used pretty much the bulk of my paycheck, and that was that. I never, kind of considered it myself as an investor. I would always invest my 401k and IRA, but that was about as much as I would think about retirement, right? Well, from there, I ended up Googling, how to invest capital and landed on real estate. Bought my first 4 unit in 2017, ended up using my agent that I'd used to purchase my single family home from here. And that was in 2017. Ended up deciding from reading books, Bigger Pockets, and that general path that I was going to self-manage it. I decided on multifamily right off the bat, mainly because I'd had single family experience in the past as an owner, but from looking at the way in which if you have a vacancy, you're 100% vacant, and that didn't really make me feel that comfortable. So I thought, well, at least with a small plex, if someone moves out, you've still got some income coming in to cover those expenses, right? So that was my reasoning for multifamily. I haven't looked back since. I've decided I was going to continue to buy more of those quads or triplexes, and ended up using a HELOC actually from my primary to fund my renovation on that, and brought the rents up from 650 average to like 1100 in the course of 9 months. And the light bulb just went off, right? So from there, I went to do a cash out refinance and became a bit frustrated because I've been educating myself on, the way in which appraisers, calculate value. And had it have been a commercial multifamily property, 5 units or up, I probably would have actually netted an additional $100,000. So that's what made me think, I need to get out of the 4 unit and below space and get into the commercial space. So from there, I went to a boot camp back in 2019. This was connected with some folks there, and actually did my first syndication with the group of people I met at that boot camp here in Tampa. Did a 59 unit. Just sold that this past April. So that was a first full cycle with agency as well.
Oh, congratulations on that. That's great.
Yes, appreciate that. And then ended up buying a a vacation property, actually, a short-term rental up in the mountains of Tennessee. We used to go up there every summer to vacation, and decided that instead of just wasting money on, someone else, we would go to the same place all the time. Let's just start looking, and connected with another investor in that market, and she gave me some really good guidance on how to get into that business. So at that point, I'd actually, believe it or not, had enough sort of cash flow and to be able to quit my W-2 in 2020. So we actually did a 2-year long RV trip, which we just got back from 2 months ago. Did like 35 states, and could tell the whole story throughout the whole podcast on that. But in that journey while we were traveling, the first 4 months or so, it was like a vacation. And then I was like, you know what, I need to get back into, what fulfills me. And that was multifamily real estate. So joined the mentorship program, and really just catapulted me into doing more deals, and bought an 8-unit that same year. And I've actually JV'd 3 deals since joining as well after that 8-unit. So that's what puts me up to that unit count right now, and currently actually looking to syndicate my next deal for the next one.
Wow, that's great. That's great. So much great info there. So after a short amount of time, you were able to essentially cover all of your expenses and move to, real estate full time, created some time freedom. I love that. And we've spoken about this before, but I love that you were able to create the kind of time freedom that you wanted. And, you and your family traveled around the country and saw so many beautiful things and created so many great experiences. And it really was just a short amount of time of real estate that helped to catapult you into that.
That's correct. Yeah, my plan, like I said, was to do that first quad and continue doing that. And then I understood the power of doing the multifamily commercial side, and just networking with the right people. And I knew as well, by burning the boats, that honestly is the way that motivates certainly me, right?
Yeah.
When you don't have an option, you can't go back. Well, you can go back. I shouldn't say that, but I certainly wouldn't want to.
And if I'm correct, if I remember correctly, you rented your home out when you decided to travel, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, where we are here in Florida, Southwest Florida, the rents are tremendous. And we did really well cash flow wise, especially from a property I bought as a foreclosure in 2012, right? So that's got a nice mortgage right now.
Okay. So in your syndication deals, you originally, I guess, your first syndication, were you a limited partner in that, or were you also a general partner in that opportunity?
Yeah. So believe it or not, I was able to add value to the team I met at that conference. And the value that I was able to add was I already had the asset management experience from my quad. I was dealing with contractors. I did a lot of renovation myself. Although I only had about a year or so's experience, I did actually in the end pick a good property manager for that asset. And that's what I added to the team for that 59 unit. They were looking for somebody that had the asset management experience, understood how to deal with contractors, what kind of options to put into those units that we were renovating to get the best bang for our buck. So I was able to give a lot of input on that. So I was a general partner.
That's great. That's great in your first opportunity. And I think oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this myself. I think oftentimes we look at opportunities, and I think sometimes, and maybe this is just me, but I'll look at myself and say, well, maybe I don't have quite as much experience as the partners want. But we've talked about this a few times on this show, that there are several different roles, and what one of us may exceed at, someone else may not, and there's always some way that you can add value to an opportunity.
100%. And it was interesting. The thing that really allowed us to connect was when we compared our underwriting, because it was a deal that I already knew about, but they actually knew the broker better than I did. So they had the deal in contract, and it was a deal that I'd already underwritten. So we shared our underwriting together on a call just like this, and it was very, very close, right, in terms of our returns, our plan, and that just gave us a lot of confidence that we were, we just drived well.
Oh, okay. So then moving forward, you've moved into a few other opportunities in Southern Florida. What do those opportunities look like? You said you had a few JV deals, right?
Yeah, so actually the last 3 deals I've done have all been joint ventures. So I JV'd a 16 unit with another member of our mentorship program in Gainesville, Florida in
Okay.
2021. And then we actually a month later, we JV'd a 24 unit in Mobile, Alabama. And then we just closed in June a 24 unit, real nice asset actually in East Tennessee, just in the Knoxville MSA. Those are 24 townhomes built in 2018. So really pleased about that one.
Wow. So Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, are you looking for the best opportunity that you can find partners with, or are you going to look in specific areas? I know you live right outside of Tampa, so I know you do a lot of underwriting in that area. What has brought you to, those multiple different locations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked. So yeah, my core market is Southwest Florida. So I go all the way from Fort Myers up to North Tampa. That's kind of my territory. However, the deal in Gainesville, that was from a good friend of mine that I'd met through the community. It was one of his first commercial deals, and him and I were already, good friends, and we spent a lot of time underwriting together. And we decided that it would make sense for our synergies to work together to take that deal on together. We knew the broker too. The deal in Alabama, again through partners I'd met through the community. I came in kind of as a consultant kind of role, and just for a small amount of equity, I was able to bring in some net worth, bring in my experience on the lending piece, the asset management, and just general guidance really. So I wouldn't normally have been investing in Alabama. That's just the way it worked out. Tennessee, though, is my secondary market, mainly because we have that cabin there in East Tennessee. So I keep an eye on East Tennessee for that reason, because I already go to that location about 3 or 4 times a year. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to do that. Plus, obviously, we have some other connections in Knoxville through our coaching program. So that helps.
And your properties in Tennessee, your original properties, they're Pigeon Forge, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And so that one, you're using that for short-term rental, correct? That's a short-term rental opportunity.
It is. Yeah. That was a bit of a shiny penny, honestly, at the time. That wouldn't have been something that I would have normally have done, but we used to go there anyway. And it is a distraction, though. It's nothing like multifamily. And I think, for those that compare it, it's a very different business. So
yeah. Do you find it to be very time intensive?
At the start, yes.
Yeah.
It was a solid 6 months to get that moving off the ground.
Okay.
But it was not a rental when we bought it. It was a single family residence for a retired couple. So we had to furnish it. It took us, 3 solid weeks to get it ready. And then from there, we had to build our review base and make sure we were catering to everyone that, to get our algorithm up and within the 8 Airbnb robo listings. And it's a lot of work. It was a big distraction for multifamily. And now we have the systems kind of plugged in. I probably could add more, and it actually would be very doable. And actually, my wife, she does the majority of the management, because we self-manage that actually.
Okay.
Because of the management costs are so expensive up there. You'll spend 30 to 40% on a third-party manager, believe it or not, in that market. So that just eats into most of your profit, right? So we self-manage that, and it's so doable. There's so many good automation tools out there that allow it. So
yeah, I have not spent much time in the short-term rental market just yet. I know that's a little bit out of focus for me right now, and I'm sure that maybe at some time in the future it'll be something that I take a look at. But I'm trying so hard to just stay singularly focused on what I know I want.
That's very important, and it's a good it's good to have those extra income streams. But like you said, it's good to focus on growing the your core business first. And I think if an opportunity comes along and you may want to partner with someone that's already doing it, that would be totally doable as well. So I talk about short-term rentals almost as much as I do long-terms. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We those of us who have had investment properties and those of us who have had long-term rental properties, it's always the sort of inside joke, I guess, that people always say, oh, what do you want to deal with tenants and toilets? What do you want to deal with tenants and toilets? And that's a block that I think, some of us look at and say, well, it's not actually that big of a deal. And for me, when I think of short-term rentals, that my first thought is like, I don't want to deal with reviews and turnover.
Yeah, you had that. you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of advice I'll give people that are thinking about it, and it's you're in the hospitality business at this point. You are reliant on those reviews. You need to be taking care of those people. They're on vacation just for a few nights. You have to be quick. You have to have an excellent team on the ground to respond to issues they have. So yeah, it's just very different.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. So you and I originally met at a Jake and Gino boot camp, I believe, back in last November. It's been almost a year in Atlanta, and we met on a 5-mile run. And then we've also spent some time together in Florida. I was in Florida earlier this year, and we were able to spend a little bit of time together. And then we also did another boot camp in May in Knoxville, and another boot camp equals another run. So we were able to get in there on a run. And the last 2 times I saw you, you were in the process of preparing for your ultra marathon. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I know you completed an ultra marathon a little earlier this year, and then you have another one coming up, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I would have normally have not entered another one so soon. The ultra marathon was in the Finger Lakes in New York. We were still traveling on an RV at that time, and I'd always wanted to do I got into trail running in a massive way when we were traveling in Colorado and Utah. I just started, trail running. It's just there's so many options out there, and just got into it in a big way. And I'm like, you know what, this is something I really want to do. I want to enter an ultra marathon. Never even done a marathon in my life at that point, bear in mind. So I've done a few halves and stuff, but connected with some people that that were in the sport, and got a training plan together. And actually, quite a few people in our community have done ultras too. So I've got some advice from those guys, and I'd love to get a group together and do one. That'd be amazing. But yeah, the New York marathon, the New York trail race was pretty intense, and believe it or not, it was supposed to be one of the more beginner ultras. So my training was 3 months, and I was running at the peak probably around 60 miles a week over the course of about 5 days. What I wasn't expecting was, although I did know there was going to be some elevation, I didn't expect there to be so much downhill long slogs. And when I say like long slogs, there was one particular section that was about 4 to 5 miles all downhill, and I didn't realize that's really hard to train for here in Florida, because Florida's super flat.
Yeah.
So I would do hill repeats a lot. I was doing hill repeats three times a week, but not for that kind of duration. So I ended up, I just got diagnosed actually. I've got it's a patellar pain syndrome on my left knee, and it's caused from just can be caused from overtraining, but what the bulk of it was from the I wasn't able to train on the downhills. So I got about one loop in, which is about 14 miles, and I started getting a little bit of a niggle on my left knee, especially on the downhills. And I came into the aid station and refilled all my stuff and went back out. That first downhill section, it was like, man, this is really painful. And it got to a point where I was just kind of ignoring the pain. And I'll come on to what got me through that in a moment, but it ended up slowing me down a little bit, and got to a point where I was in this kind of like zone of just avoiding the pain. I missed one of the little pink flags, which are on the ground you're supposed to follow. And about 20 minutes later, I'm off the trail. I don't know where I am. And luckily there was kind of a little bit wet in places. So I just looked down, and there was no other footprints apart from my own. Right. So I'm like, yeah, that's not good. So I turned back around, backtracked, found where I went wrong. And so there's a cutoff on these races, right? I needed to be finishing my second loop by 2:15. Well, this mistake happened at around 1:45, and I'm still probably at least 6 miles plus from that end of that second loop. And anyway, long story short, I literally got across the finish line for that at that second loop at 2:18, 3 minutes late. So I did finish an ultra marathon because it was 50K, but they didn't allow me to continue on my third loop. So that's one of the reasons I'm like, you know what, I need to do what I signed up for. So I went ahead and signed up for another ultra. This is a 45 miler, so not quite as long, but it's local to me. It's in Lakeland, Florida, and that's on November 19th. So I'm in training for that right now.
Wow. So, and you had told me this story before, and it's still so interesting to me because, I know it takes a lot of effort. I know it takes a lot of, you visualize your training, you visualize your plan, and, something as simple as, you're focusing on obviously making sure you don't injure a place in your body where you already feel some soreness, and you know, the marking isn't all that big, right? A little pink ribbon, and you must have blown by it, and you estimate that you went about 20 minutes out of your way. That had to be a tough, tough adventure, I guess, for you. And then to come back, and I guess at that point you probably had already figured that you were going to be really close up against it, right?
100%. Yeah, it was interesting when you're in that situation, pain goes out the window completely. And I'm like, you know what, I got to make this. And I
Hmm.
just put, I hammered it. I was pushing probably mid 7 minute miles, just to try and make this thing. In the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do a third loop, another 16 miles. Once I get across here, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, I just got to get to my cutoff. And it was neat because my wife actually, she wondered where I was, and I was trying to text her, voice to text, while I'm like running and being, kind of out of breath. I'm like, hey, I'm like 2 miles out, come meet me. I need some help. I need some more salt pills,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
she she runs like 2 miles. She goes, oh, I think they'll let you through. They're pretty cool. And then, but the race director is like, nope, rules are rules. So I can't let you keep going because you missed it. Like, okay.
So now this is redemption, right? This is time to get back at it and get towards it. So, I remember from our hearing you speak about the hills and all. One thing I specifically remember from our run in Knoxville, there was that big hill down by the river,
There is.
and you were so excited for the hill. You were like, "Oh, I want to run up and down this hill a few times because I don't get much hill training in." And the rest of us were like, "Oh man, I don't want to run on this hill." I mean, that was a pretty significant. I recall that street. That was a pretty significant hill there.
It's a beast. It's one of the steepest hills I've actually ever run on. Yeah, it's impressive.
Hmm. So what are you doing at this point now? I guess you're a little under 2 months out from your next ultra, 45 miles. Anything different with training? Anything related to the knee injury that you're doing to try and keep it unchecked?
Yeah. So I went to a sports medicine doctor actually, and they gave me the diagnosis because I wasn't entirely sure what I did. And they explained, and he gave me a good check over and gave me some really good strength exercises to do on my legs actually. So I've been doing that 3 or 4 times a week. So that's huge. I wasn't doing that enough. I was out there just kind of doing the miles, and I also don't stretch enough. So that's another thing I began doing more of as well. Stretching is huge
Yeah.
to get you through. So, and then yeah, I'm actually not doing as many miles. I've got a pretty good base still, and I'll complement that with road biking. So I'm doing probably 100 miles a week on the bike as well.
Okay.
And although that's kind of different muscle groups, it's going to help me on my base and the cardio because it wasn't the base I had the problem with on the first ultra. I felt plenty fit. It was just purely the injury. It stopped me. Well, and the mistake on that turn, but
Yeah.
so I and I'm not in it to place either. So I've
Sure.
got a pretty strong mindset. I know if I put my mind to something, I'll finish it. So it'll get done. So I'm confident I'll do it.
Well, great, great. Best of luck to you. I can't wait to find out more about it. I can't wait to see those pictures of you crossing the finish line.
Thanks, buddy.
So, for you, obviously you're doing a lot of running, cardio training. How do you feel that affects your business and just sort of your growth towards success?
No, 100%. So I think when you come up against something that's difficult, right, and you get through it and you achieve it, whether that be in exercise, whether it be in business, I feel like there's a strong connection because it's quite easy in this business we're in real estate to come up against a lot of obstacles and it can be painful. And if you don't continue to push and continue to do those reps, get up from those little, tumbles you make, then I feel like that's a huge mistake. So I take those lessons I learn in my endurance sports and apply them directly to business. And that's honestly, I think how how I'm able to do what I do because I just keep doing it because I know I'll get there.
Yeah. Are you a music runner, or do you run mostly in your thoughts?
I used to be a music runner, like when I first got into running back when I still lived in the UK. And honestly, when I stopped using music, because one of my previous managers was a Ironman athlete actually, and he said, "You got to stop running with music." He said, "I don't listen to music, and you need to listen to your body." I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll try it." And he's actually correct. I actually do run faster. That can get a little bit boring. So what I do now, which works quite well, is I'll kind of mix it up. If I'll listen to podcasts or and the different thing is in the ultra running training, you actually are running in zone 2, so your effort is a lot lower. I run slower. My heart rate is like 120, 125 maybe. So I can still have a conversation. So I'm able to actually still, because you have to, when you're running for 10, 12 hours, you can't have, massive heart rate through all that time. You're just not going to make it.
Yeah.
So that allows you to think about more, and you can kind of look around. And then if I do start to get into a little bit of a funk, so yesterday I just did a half for a training run, and it was pretty hot. It was hitting probably like low 90s by the time I was still about 4 miles out, and I'm like, I need a bit of a boost here. So I just put on some tunes and kind of push through. So if last resort, I'll put music on because it does help tremendously.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I go back and forth just like you. Sometimes I'm out there and a lot of my runs, I'll run 5Ks or 5 miles or something like that. I'm not running nearly the distance that you are. But a lot of times it's just me and my thoughts. And sometimes I'm like, solving all the world's problems while I'm running. And then sometimes I don't want to think, right? And in those cases, I'll pop some music in. I have one of those little bands you put around your waist. You can fit your phone in it. And I never wear headphones. I struggle with them. I've had so many instances where they fall out. I can't feel that they're right in the right place or whatever. So that just hasn't worked for me. So sometimes I do music. I would say most times though, I'm not. Very interesting stat or fact about heart rate though. I guess it hadn't really occurred to me. Again, when I'm running 5K, 5 miles or whatever, and I look down, my heart rate probably is somewhere around 155, 160, and that's probably for less than an hour, right?
Right.
And yeah, I guess it makes a lot of sense to me that you would not want your heart to be in that place for 10, 11, 12 hours.
No. I mean, the top athletes, the ultra runners that basically do it for a living, yeah, I'm sure their heart rates are a little bit more elevated because that their condition. But for me, I training in that zone 2 just allows you to train for, that endurance effort that you're going to be doing a long time. And it's funny actually, my resting heart rate has dropped substantially from doing this training as well. So that's a good benefit as well.
So you're focusing on that from the very beginning. You're focusing on making sure that your heart rate doesn't get too high in the very beginning.
Oh yeah. Now on the race, you kind of don't want to be paying too much attention to that. You've already done your training. You can listen to your body. It's easy to get caught up into the pace of other folks as well. So you do have to be a bit careful of that. But as long as you've put the training in and you've made it to the start line, honestly, that's half the battle in these races. Just not injuring yourself in training.
Sure.
So it's very easy to overtrain for this stuff. So, and that's actually something I'm doing now. I'm doing less of those long. I'm probably not even going to do the longest one I'll probably do is maybe 25, perhaps something like that. Whereas I was doing, 28, 30 mile one-off runs in past one. And I don't think I needed to, honestly. That is a mental, if some people need that mentally, right? To think, okay, well, I've already done 30, so I know I can do 40, right? And it's personal, but I think, I already have done 36 because I did it, in July. So I know I can do 45. So another 9.
How many loops around is your race that you're doing in November?
3 loops.
3 loops, similar to the other one. So they're 2 potential cutoffs, I assume.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't actually looked yet. I don't really want to kind of think about the cost too much, but
Okay.
as long as I don't make any errors on the course, I'll be just fine. My pace will be okay.
Great.
Yep.
Great. Awesome. Well, we could probably talk about this for a long time, you and I, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again soon. I want to kind of get into the final 3 questions. So same 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show. For you, what is your definition of success?
Yeah, great question. It's something that I think about all the time, and I still haven't really figured it out fully, but I would say having that daily gratitude is super important, and being present. I've got 2 young daughters, great family. We have a wonderful life. We've got all those memories that we did for the 2 years of traveling. So to be grateful for what we've done and where we are right now and our health, that's really huge. I definitely do find myself looking too far down the road thinking, oh man, I really need to get to that point, or I really need to get that many units, or definitely having getting better with understanding, growing and striving to be a better person, a partner, husband, father for sure. I want to continue adding value to as many people as I can as possible. And also what I learned from quitting my W-2 was that, yes, it was a huge milestone, definitely to get out of the W-2. And it was all I ever thought about for years, it felt pretty neat, when it happened. Definitely not as amazing as I think I was building it up to me in my mind. And then once you've done it, you're like, now what, right? So, and that's where you have to come back to figuring out it's not about that, getting to that point, then I'm going to be happy. That's not the way it works. It's that daily growth, that fulfillment, and being in the moment every day. So that's what I'm learning.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on so many great things there, but it's so true. I mean, happiness comes from within and from gratitude, right? And if I've learned from so many people that it's so true. If you say, once I get to this point, I'll be happy. Once I get to making this much money, I'll be happy. Once I get to this certain milestone, I'll be happy. The reality is that in most cases, that's not where your happiness is coming from. It comes from the important things like you mentioned, the time with your family, the ability to do the things that you want to do, the ability to learn from others, the ability to give back and provide value for others. So that's great. I love that answer.
Thank you.
So question number 2, for someone who's new to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success, can you give a good book recommendation?
I will, and this ties in well with the whole endurance sport, and it's David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. And I personally like the Audible version a lot because they interview him after each chapter, so you really get a peek behind the curtain of him. And that allowed me to honestly get through that second lap. I kept thinking about him and running on his broken legs and how strong his mind was, throughout all of his challenges in his life. And I'm like, I've got nothing to complain about here. I've got a tiny little bit of pain. Let's get this done, So, and even when your body starts telling you that you've got these little, pain points or whatever, you've still got another 50% left in the tank, honestly. So
yeah,
our mind tries to trick us.
That's a great book recommendation. I actually haven't read it yet, but I do follow David Goggins. I first learned of him when I read Jesse Itzler's book, Living with the Seal, which is funny and very interesting. But Jesse Itzler even talks about that in his book, that he learned that from David Goggins, that he says that your body's somewhere around 35 to 40% of its max effort when it starts to tell you to quit.
Yep, exactly. And I think that applies in business just as much. You think, oh, I've done so much in this and I'm tapped out, I can't do any more. Yeah, you can. You're just not prioritizing it.
Yeah. So before we get into the final question, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to have you on, and I'm glad to be able to talk about your ultra marathon, and maybe we'll even do a follow-up. How can we support you? How can people reach out to you directly, and how can we provide support for you?
Appreciate that. Yeah. So you can reach out to me through my website. It's rightmoveproperties.net, and my phone number is 941-504-0548. And then my direct email is Matthew, with 2 T's, at rightmoveproperties.net. And I'm also over Facebook as Matt Dunn and LinkedIn.
Great. And final question, if you can think back to a young Matt, ages like 10 to 12 years old, knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to yourself or to any pre-teenage child to help them, guide them towards success?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So for me, growing up, certainly in the UK, back in the 90s, was when I was leaving high school. I remember you get and it might be the same now, but you got to be very careful not to allow yourself to be placed in a box by others who you deem as being authority figures. So whether that be because you got maybe substandard grades, or it was the teacher opinions, or whatever it is, don't allow that to have an influence on what you can achieve, and still continue, look for your passion and go after it, because it's so important. And there's a really good book, actually, if you don't mind me recommending a second book on this point, and it's called Mindsets by Carol Dweck, and it talks about that exact point of how it's very important, when children are, at that developmental stage, and certainly very influential, to make sure that they still understand that, that they've got an abundance of options available to them. It doesn't matter perhaps if they were, struggling in a certain subject, or told that they weren't going to get to a certain point. That's irrelevant. So huge.
Well, that's great. That's great information. I like that. And yeah, it's so true when you talk about who you deem as an authority. I've heard, certain people say, like, these teachers told me I was going to be a failure, but it's not even just that. I think sometimes, especially kids, my daughter's just starting middle school, sometimes they deem the words and opinions of other kids as an authority too. And
exactly. Yeah.
I think that's a great piece of advice to be mindful of who you're deeming as an authority of you. That's very good advice. I like that.
Yeah. And then, just to kind of finish your question, I mean, your peer group, right? That's massive. Who you associating yourself with, choosing those friends is very important,
Yeah.
in that stage in life, at that age. I was hanging out with guys that were definitely not in a position I'm at now, right? So I got out of my peer group.
Yeah.
That's very important. And then I think the third point I would make is, you honestly don't have to follow that conventional path that we get kind of trained, I think, at a young age, that everyone does. The school, the college, the student debt, then it's the 40-year career, and maybe you get 10, 20 years of retirement and you're done, right? That's not the only option. There's many other options to take, and go after what you're passionate about. And if that doesn't work, try something else you're passionate about, So you don't have to follow that path.
That's great advice. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Matt. I really appreciate it. Make sure you check out Matt Dunn. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give a positive review. Thanks so much for listening in, and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.